Iris's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the library table, her breath shallow. The whisper still echoed in her ears, curling through her mind like smoke. Iris Potter. She had seen something, someone. That hooded figure, standing in the shadows, watching her. But no one else had been there. At least, no one that should have been. Her heart pounded as she turned her gaze back to the letter, still gripped tightly in her fingers. The past is waking, and so are they. Be ready. It was a warning. But who was warning her? And why did it feel like something inside her already knew? Her head throbbed, a dull ache spreading behind her eyes. Lately, things had been off. She was forgetting things, small things at first, like where she had left her quill or how she had gotten from one corridor to another. But then the gaps got longer. She had woken up the other night with dirt under her fingernails and no memory of how it got there. A week ago, she had found herself standing outside Moaning Myrtle's bathroom with no idea why. And now she was hearing voices. It's nothing, she told herself. You're just tired. Stressed. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. A cold breeze swept through the library, though there were no open windows. The candles flickered. And then, her fingers moved on their own. Before she even realized it, she had taken out her quill and opened the diary. Tom Riddle's diary. The pages stared back at her, blank and waiting. Her hands shook as she dipped the quill in ink. She didn't want to write. She shouldn't write. But she couldn't stop herself. Who are they? She scrawled, her handwriting uneven. The ink faded. A moment later, the answer appeared. The ones who came before. The ones who will return. And you, Iris, you will help bring them back. Her vision swam. The candlelight seemed dimmer. No, she whispered. I don't want to. But her hands wouldn't listen. The quill moved again, writing words she didn't choose. You already are. Iris gasped and yanked her hand away from the diary as if it had burned her. The inked words on the page gleamed for a moment before vanishing into the parchment. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths. The library around her felt distant, unreal. The whisper of her own name still curled through her thoughts like an echo that refused to fade. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be doing this. Yet she felt drawn to it. The diary sat before her, silent and unassuming. But Iris felt something beneath its surface, a pull like an invisible thread coiled around her mind, tugging her deeper. I should throw it away. The thought flashed through her head, desperate and urgent. And yet she didn't move. Instead, her fingers hovered over the open book, her pulse hammering in her ears. Ask another question. The voice slithered through her mind, a whisper that was not her own. She swallowed hard, fingers trembling. No. A sharp pain struck through her skull like a lightning bolt. She winced, pressing her hands to her temples. The pain was brief but fierce, like something punishing her for resisting. Her vision blurred for a second. And when it cleared, she wasn't in the library anymore. She was standing in the middle of a vast, dark chamber. The air was thick and damp, the scent of age and decay pressing against her senses. Massive serpent carvings lined the stone walls, their eyes hollow and menacing. A figure stood at the far end, waiting. Tall, dark-haired. His pale face was smooth, almost handsome, but there was something wrong about him. His eyes gleamed with something cold and ancient. Tom Riddle. Iris's breath hitched. She tried to move, to step back, but she couldn't. Her body wasn't hers anymore. Her limbs refused to obey. A slow smile spread across Riddle's face as he stepped closer. His presence filled the space, suffocating and overwhelming. You're finally listening, he murmured, voice smooth as silk. I was beginning to think you never would. Iris wanted to scream, to demand answers, to run. But all she could do was stare as Riddle reached out and pressed a hand to her forehead. Darkness crashed over her like a wave. Iris's mind swam in darkness, a heavy, suffocating void that swallowed her thoughts. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. But she could hear. Whispers curled around her, some distant, some so close they felt like they were inside her head. Let go. You don't need them. You were never meant to live in his shadow. You are stronger than him. The words wrapped around her like vines, twisting tighter and tighter. A part of her fought back, screaming that this wasn't right, that this wasn't her. But another part, one buried deep within, listened. She had always been seen as Harry Potter's little sister, the one always a step behind, always measured against him. Even now, people whispered about him, about his destiny, while she was just there. Forgotten. Overlooked. Except now, someone was paying attention. You are special, Iris. You are important. Tom's voice slid into her thoughts, soothing, persuasive. You are not just Harry Potter's sister. You are more. A flash of light split through the darkness, and suddenly, she was standing back in the Chamber of Secrets. Tom Riddle loomed before her, his expression calm and knowing. She gasped, her body trembling as she took a step back. No, no, this isn't real. You're messing with my head. Riddle chuckled, tilting his head. Am I? Iris's breath came in shaky bursts. You're controlling me. I don't know how, but you are. Tom sighed, almost disappointed. Iris, I have only ever given you what you've wanted. A voice. A place where you are not just the girl in his shadow. Iris clenched her fists, trying to shake the cold fog clouding her mind. You don't understand anything about me. Riddle's smile sharpened. Don't I? The air around her shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't in the chamber anymore. She was standing in the great hall, watching as students fawned over her brother. They whispered his name, gazed at him with admiration. No one looked at her. No one even noticed her standing there. She had lived in this moment 1,000 times. Riddle stepped beside her. You felt this, haven't you? His voice was smooth, almost kind. The loneliness, the frustration, the feeling that no one will ever see you for who you really are. Iris's throat tightened. Because he was right. He smiled, leaning in. But I see you. The world flickered, and suddenly she was back in the chamber, her heart pounding. Tom Riddle extended a hand. Let me help you, Iris. Together, we can be so much more than the shadows they force us to live in. Iris stared at him, her breath uneven, her mind a battlefield of doubt and resistance. And then, she took a step forward. Iris's foot barely touched the ground before a sharp pain lanced through her skull, like 1,000 needles piercing her mind at once. She staggered, gasping, her vision flickering between the chamber and the Gryffindor common room. Flashes of her friends, her brother, her life. No. The word formed in her mind, but it felt weak, fragile against the pull of Tom Riddle's voice. Why do you resist? He asked, his voice silk-smooth yet pressing, wrapping around her like chains. You've always wanted to be seen, to be more than a shadow. I can give you that, Iris. Iris clutched her head, trying to shut him out, but his words burrowed deeper, planting doubt like poison. I don't need you, she gritted out, trying to step back. Tom sighed as if disappointed. You say that, and yet you came to me. You opened my diary. You confided in me, Iris. I have listened when no one else has. The memories rushed back. The quiet nights when she had scribbled her thoughts into the diary, thinking it was harmless. The confessions of feeling overshadowed, of struggling to find her own identity. And Tom had answered. He had understood. You chose me, Iris, Tom said, his voice soft but unyielding. And I have chosen you. Something cold slithered around her, an invisible force tightening like a noose. Her limbs felt heavy, her mind growing foggy. The diary pulsed in her pocket, whispering, calling. Let go. You don't need them. Harry will never understand you the way I do. Her breathing hitched, because somewhere deep down a small part of her believed him. But then, a voice, faint but real. Iris. The name cut through the haze like a blade. Her eyes snapped open, and she gasped, staggering back. The chamber around her wavered, flickering like a mirage. Another voice. Iris, wake up. It was Harry. And Ron? Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. This wasn't right. This wasn't real. Tom's expression darkened, his charming mask cracking. Don't listen to them, he urged, stepping closer. They don't see you, Iris. They never have. But I do. I always have. Iris clenched her fists. No, she whispered. Tom's eyes narrowed. What? I said a no. A burst of energy surged through her, raw and wild. The chamber trembled. Tom hissed, his figure flickering. Just for a moment, just enough for Iris to run. And she did. She ran toward the voice calling her name, toward the light breaking through the darkness. She ran toward her brother. Iris gasped as she stumbled forward, the weight of Tom's presence still clawing at her mind. The darkness of the chamber wavered, distorting like ripples in water. Iris! Harry's voice rang out, filled with urgency. She blinked, her surroundings flickering between two realities, the cold, damp chamber of secrets and the familiar warmth of Hogwarts. The diary pulsed in her pocket, a sickening heartbeat that tethered her to Tom's influence. "You're not leaving me, Iris." Tom's voice slithered through her thoughts. "I am part of you now." A sharp pain sliced through her temple, and she dropped to her knees with a strangled gasp. The whispers coiled tighter. "You belong here. With me. Harry will never understand." Through the haze, she saw movement, a shadow growing in front of her. Tom Riddle stepped forward, his presence more solid than before, as if feeding off her hesitation. "You can't fight me, Iris," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "You don't want to." Her breath came in ragged gasps. She wanted to fight back, but Tom's grip on her mind was suffocating. And then, warmth. A hand grabbing hers. "Come back, Iris." "Harry." His touch sent a jolt through her, breaking through the fog. She looked up and saw his face, worried, desperate, real. Tom's expression twisted into fury. "No." He lunged forward, his form crackling like static. "She is mine." The diary in Iris's pocket burned against her skin. She let out a cry, clutching her head as her body trembled. The battle waged within her, Tom's voice whispering, Harry's grip anchoring her. "You're not alone," Harry shouted, pulling her closer. "You never were." Something inside her cracked. The years of feeling unseen, unheard, it had blinded her to the truth. She had always been more than just Harry Potter's sister. She had always been Iris. With a strangled scream, she yanked the diary from her pocket and threw it across the chamber. It skidded across the wet stone, pages fluttering wildly. Tom roared in rage, his form flickering like a dying flame. Ron rushed forward, sword in hand, the sword of Gryffindor. With a determined cry, he drove the blade straight through the diary. A piercing, inhuman scream filled the chamber. Tom Riddle's form convulsed, twisting and distorting before shattering into nothing. "Silence!" Iris gasped, her body trembling as the last of the dark magic released its hold on her. She felt light, as if a weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying had been lifted. Harry pulled her into a tight hug, his voice shaking. "You scared the hell out of me." Iris let out a breathless laugh, clutching onto him. "I scared myself." Ron groaned, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Remind me to never go near a possessed diary again." Iris looked at the smoking remains of the diary, her chest heaving. The shadows were gone, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Iris sat on the edge of the hospital wing bed, staring at her hands. They trembled slightly, as if her body hadn't yet accepted that it was over. The weight of Tom's voice, the sickly pull of the diary, it was all gone. But the memory of it clung to her like a shadow. Harry sat beside her, arms crossed, his knee bouncing with restless energy. He had barely left her side since they escaped the chamber. Madame Pomfrey had fussed over her, muttering about exhaustion and dark magic residue. She had forced Iris to drink several potions before finally leaving her to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. "How do you feel?" Harry finally asked. His voice was careful, like he was afraid she might shatter. Iris exhaled slowly. "Lighter. But, I don't know. It's weird. It's like he's still there, just in my head now instead of out loud." She tapped her temple. "I keep expecting to hear him whisper again." Harry's jaw clenched. "You won't. He's gone." His fingers curled into fists. "I should have noticed something was wrong earlier. I should have." "Harry," Iris interrupted, shaking her head. "This wasn't your fault." His expression darkened. "You were alone in this for months. If I had just—" "Stop it," she said firmly, reaching for his hand. "You were always there. I didn't let you in." Harry's shoulders slumped, but he squeezed her hand in return. Before either of them could say more, the door to the hospital wing burst open. Ron and Hermione rushed in, out of breath, their faces filled with urgency. "You're awake!" Hermione exclaimed, relief washing over her features. She hurried to Iris's side. "We were so worried." Ron flopped onto the foot of her bed. "Honestly, after everything that happened, I thought we'd all be stuck in here for days." "Dumbledore's back, though." McGonagall called an emergency meeting with him as soon as he arrived. Harry sat up straighter. "Dumbledore's back?" Hermione nodded. "Yes, and I think he already knows about everything. About the chamber, about Riddle, about Iris." She hesitated. And I think he wants to talk to us. Iris swallowed hard. Of course he did. After everything that had happened. How could he not? Before she could dwell on it, the hospital wing doors creaked open again. Professor McGonagall stepped inside, her stern gaze sweeping over them. Behind her, Dumbledore entered, his blue eyes twinkling with unreadable wisdom. I see you're awake, Miss Potter, Dumbledore said warmly. That is excellent news. Iris sat up straighter, her heartbeat quickening. Professor, Harry started, but Dumbledore held up a hand. There will be time for explanations, but first I must ask, how are you feeling, Iris? His gaze softened. Possession is a terrible thing to endure. Iris hesitated. There was something about the way he spoke, as if he understood far more than he let on. I feel strange, she admitted. Like I lost something, but I'm not sure what. Dumbledore nodded slowly. That is the nature of dark magic. It lingers, even when the source is destroyed. But make no mistake, you are free from Tom Riddle's grasp. She wanted to believe him. McGonagall cleared her throat, her sharp eyes landing on Harry and Iris. There are matters to discuss. But for now, the school needs to settle. You children have been through enough for one night. Dumbledore smiled kindly. Rest now. We will talk soon. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Iris found herself blurting out, Professor. Dumbledore paused, glancing back at her. She swallowed. Why me? A flicker of sadness crossed his face. Because Tom Riddle preys on fear, on doubt, and on those who feel unseen. He sensed your struggles, Iris. But in the end, you were stronger than him. Iris lowered her gaze, gripping the blanket beneath her fingers. Stronger. She didn't feel strong. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to be. The next morning, the castle seemed different. The tension that had gripped Hogwarts for months had finally lifted. The halls were no longer filled with hushed whispers of fear, but rather murmurs of curiosity and relief. The Chamber of Secrets had been real. The monster had been slain. And Iris Potter had been the one taken, but also the one who survived. Iris walked alongside Harry, Ron, and Hermione as they made their way to the Great Hall for breakfast. Students turned to stare as they passed. Some whispered, others simply gawked. She could hear them murmuring her name. That's her. She was possessed by you-know-who. Did you hear? She almost. But how did she fight him off? Iris clenched her fists, her stomach twisting uncomfortably. Harry noticed and leaned in. Ignore them. Easy for him to say. He was used to the attention. The stares. The rumors. For her, it felt like suffocating under a weight she couldn't escape. As they entered the Great Hall, the conversations quieted for a moment before resuming at full force. Fred and George were the first to approach, sliding into the seats next to them. All right there, Iris? Fred asked, his usual mischief softened by genuine concern. Bloody terrifying what happened, George added. Not that we doubted you, of course. You're a Potter. Stubborn lot. Iris managed a small smile. Thanks, guys. Ron was already piling food onto his plate, completely unfazed by the attention. Hermione, however, was focused elsewhere. She glanced toward the staff table, where Dumbledore sat in deep conversation with McGonagall. I bet they're deciding what to do next, she murmured. Iris, do you think Dumbledore will want to speak to you again? Iris nodded slowly. I think so. He said we'd talk soon. Before Hermione could respond, a rush of wings filled the air. The morning post had arrived. Owls swooped down, dropping letters and packages onto tables. One, a small brown owl, landed directly in front of Iris. It carried a letter sealed in red wax. She hesitated before breaking it open. The parchment was old, the ink slightly smudged. You are not free yet. He is not gone. Her breath caught. The words seemed to blur before her eyes. What is it? Harry asked, frowning. Iris quickly folded the letter, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Nothing, she said. Just nothing. But deep inside, she knew it wasn't. Something was still lurking in the shadows. Iris couldn't shake the feeling that the letter meant something dangerous. She reread the words over and over in her mind. You are not free yet. He is not gone. It was like a curse whispered from the past, curling around her like invisible chains. But she didn't tell Harry. Not yet. He had been through enough. If there was something still lurking, she had to find out what it was on her own. The day passed in a blur of whispers and stolen glances. Students still stared at her, as if she might sprout snake fangs at any moment. Some looked at her with awe, others with fear. By the time evening fell, she was exhausted. She lay awake in her four-poster bed, staring at the ceiling. The dormitory was quiet except for the soft breathing of her roommates. The red wax-sealed letter sat on her nightstand, taunting her. Her fingers itched to pick it up again. Instead, she got out of bed. Slipping into her robes, she crept down the spiral staircase, stepping lightly to avoid making a sound. The Gryffindor common room was nearly empty, save for a flickering fire in the hearth. Then movement. Iris froze. A shadow shifted near the fireplace. Someone was there. Her heart pounded as she reached for her wand, her grip tightening. "Iris," a voice whispered. She exhaled sharply. "Luna." The Ravenclaw girl stepped into the firelight, her usual dreamy expression replaced with something eerily knowing. "You shouldn't be wandering alone," Luna murmured. "Not when the whispers are still following you." Iris's stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Luna tilted her head. "You feel it, don't you? The presence. The lingering magic. He's still in your mind, even if you don't hear him anymore." A shiver ran down Iris's spine. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Luna stepped closer. "They say possession leaves a mark. A door once opened is never fully shut." Iris swallowed. "So what do I do?" Luna's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You find out what he left behind." A heavy silence stretched between them. Iris knew deep down that Luna was right. The Chamber of Secrets had been closed, but a part of it had stayed inside her. And if she didn't figure out what it was, it would find her first. Iris couldn't sleep. Luna's words echoed in her mind long after she had gone back to the Ravenclaw Tower. A door once opened is never fully shut. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers clutching her blanket. She had been free of Tom Riddle's voice for days now. But was she really free? Or was something still lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike again? She needed answers. The next morning, she didn't tell Harry or Ron about her conversation with Luna. Hermione, however, noticed something was off almost immediately. "You're distracted," Hermione whispered as they walked toward the great hall. "What's going on?" Iris hesitated, then pulled Hermione aside. "I need your help, but you have to promise you won't tell Harry yet." Hermione frowned. "I don't like keeping secrets from him, Iris." "I know," Iris said quickly, "but I don't want to worry him until I know for sure." Hermione sighed, crossing her arms. "All right, what is it?" Iris took a deep breath. Luna said, "She thinks the possession left something behind. That maybe Riddle isn't entirely gone from me." Hermione's eyes widened. "Iris, that's serious." "I know. And you're just telling me this now?" "I didn't want to believe it." Hermione exhaled sharply. "All right, what do you want to do?" Iris glanced around, lowering her voice. "I need to go back to the Chamber of Secrets." Hermione paled. "What? If there's anything left, anything Riddle didn't take with him, I need to find it." Hermione shook her head. "Iris, that's dangerous. We don't even know if we can get back in without Parseltongue." "I can try," Iris said firmly. "Just help me get there." Hermione chewed her lip, clearly debating it. Then finally she sighed. "Fine. But we're telling Harry the moment we find something suspicious." "Deal." That night, when the castle was silent, Iris and Hermione slipped out of Gryffindor Tower, moving quickly through the dark corridors. The entrance to the Chamber of Secrets was in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The ghost watched them curiously as they approached the sinks. "Back so soon?" Myrtle cooed, floating closer. "What trouble are you two up to now?" Iris ignored her and ran her fingers along the faucet where Harry had spoken Parseltongue months ago. The problem was, Iris wasn't a Parselmouth. She took a deep breath, staring at the tiny snake engraving. "Open." Nothing happened. Hermione bit her lip. "Maybe if we—" Before she could finish, something shifted. A cold, crawling sensation slithered down Iris's spine. And then, without meaning to, she whispered in Parseltongue. The sink moved. The entrance opened. Hermione's breath hitched. "Iris!" Iris swallowed hard, a cold sweat forming on her neck. She shouldn't have been able to do that. But she had, and it meant one thing. Tom Riddle had left something behind after all. Iris stared at the gaping entrance to the Chamber of Secrets, her breath shallow. The stone had slid away effortlessly, just like when Harry had opened it months ago. Except this time, she had done it. Hermione grabbed her wrist. Iris, you just spoke parcel tongue. I know, Iris whispered, her heart pounding. I don't know how. Hermione's grip tightened. Yes, you do. You were possessed by Tom Riddle, Iris. Maybe he left something inside you. Iris shivered at the thought. Myrtle floated closer, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. Oh, this is exciting. Are you going back down there? I haven't seen anyone enter since your brother. Neither of them answered. Iris forced herself to breathe. We have to go. Hermione hesitated. Iris, maybe we should get Harry. No, Iris cut in. If there's something down there, I need to face it first. If we tell Harry, he'll never let me go alone. Exactly, Hermione muttered. Because this is insane. Iris shook her head. We're already here. Are you coming with me or not? Hermione let out a frustrated sigh, then nodded. All right, but if anything feels wrong, we're leaving. Agreed. Agreed. They climbed into the pipe, just as Harry had described, and slid down into the darkness. The trip was faster than Iris expected, and she hit the ground with a hard thud. Hermione landed beside her, dusting herself off. I can't believe I just did that. The chamber was just as eerie as Harry had described. Dark, damp, and covered in the bones of creatures long dead. The massive snakeskin still lay where Harry had left it, and at the far end of the hall stood the giant stone face of Salazar Slytherin. Iris's stomach churned. She had been here before. She didn't remember it, but she had been here. The last time, she hadn't been herself. The memory sent a cold shiver through her bones. She took a shaky step forward, her eyes darting around. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But something was wrong. She could feel it. Hermione pulled out her wand. All right. What now? Iris took another step, then froze. A voice. A whisper. Not in her ears. In her head. You came back. Iris's entire body tensed. The voice was smooth, familiar, too familiar. Hermione noticed the change in her. Iris? What is it? Iris's hands curled into fists. He's here. Hermione's eyes widened. Who? A low chuckle echoed in her skull. Did you really think I was gone? Iris gasped, gripping her head as pain flared behind her eyes. The chamber blurred, twisting, shifting. Then she wasn't there anymore. She was somewhere else. Somewhere dark. A memory. And in front of her stood Tom Riddle. Smiling.